Well, next I want to go to Tom Farrell, who, as we all know,
My God.
is scratch building his layout. So, Tom, welcome.
Thank you again for having me. I enjoy being on your show, and this evening I'm going to have part 3 of my new Turtle Creek project. Just a moment here. There we go. So this evening I'm going to be all over the place again. I mean, that's what happens when you scratch build a layout. The first thing I'm going to go over is the timber retaining wall, the completion of that. So last week I had brought this timber retaining wall up to this point. It's right next to a timber tunnel. And I finished that and installed it. My grant line bolts came in, and as I explained before, I cut the bolts off, sand this flat, and glue this to a piece of styrene, which I cut in length with into strips with an X-Acto knife and a ruler, and then with my chopper I cut them to a specific length so they all more or less match. But anyway, it's a nice effect, and it came out really nice. So next is a little scenery work and a little ballasting. So this is the area where my tipple from last week sits. And when I got to looking at this, I thought how nice it would be if off to the right here, I had another behind it, and off to the right, I had another tipple. So for the sake of the show, I just mocked something up. But the idea is that to put some scenery underneath this and build another tipple where the trains actually pass underneath, or the ore cars. So I cut some extruded pink foam, and using yellow wood glue that I carefully put on there. That was sarcasm. I glued it in place. I cut it with just a conventional hand saw. I cut this out, and then I put some more glue on there, and I put a second piece virtually identical to this on it. And the third piece is this open cell foam, and I don't really styrofoam, and I don't particularly like this stuff, but I had some, and I like the height that I was working with. I didn't want 3 stacks of the pink foam, the closed cell foam. It would be too high. So anyway, I used this and I put it in place. This really isn't on a slope. This is just poor photography. And you'll see how this develops. So then with scrap pieces of foam in between the track and the ledge that I'm creating here, I just stuff this with foam. And then with wood screw, or not wood screws, drywall screws, just to hold this styrofoam in place, this open cell styrofoam, the closed cell styrofoam. I just hand put them in there because they were lifting till the glue dries. And then sometimes I'll use the plaster impregnated cloth. This time I didn't. I just mixed some sculptamold up and just put it on here with a putty knife, and it pretty much dries overnight. It was pretty thick in areas, so it actually took 2 or 3 days to dry. And right there is basically the extension. Here is where I'll have that other tipple and a track. So then I thought I'd jump to ballasting. Now there's probably 20 different ways to ballast. This is how I ballast. I just take Elmer's glue in between the outside of these ties. I do both sides of the ties. Then with my ballast, I sprinkle the ballast right down the middle of the track dry. And then I sprinkle the ballast on the outside of the where I had my Elmer's glue. And then I go back with scenic cement. I like this stuff. You could mix your own with diluted Elmer's glue or matte medium. It probably is just matte medium, but I just like the consistency and the convenience of this. So I always have a couple bottles of scenic with an and I just soak the middle of the in between the rails, and it runs out into where the Elmer's glue was. It just makes for a very permanent ballasting. And there's the finished ballasting there. I go back with a dental pick and pick off all the erroneous pieces of ballast that wind up on the railroad ties. I went back and hand painted all these ties with a brush of railroad brown. And then I went back and I rusted the rails, and I always paint the tops this reddish rust. Just what I do. It's a nice effect. I mean, that's magnified grossly. And this ballast, by the way, is gray, and the rest of my railroad is buff. Just for variation, I thought I'd put this spur in with a gray, basically a granite, where the buff is a limestone. If I ever get to the other side of my layout, the freight yard, I'm going to consider doing it in this gray ballast. I just think it looks kind of neat. So then I went ahead and I started coloring the evenings, or the sculptamold that I put in there, the extension. And for this photograph, I put in the tipple. Now, I've never actually colored my sculptamold with Hunter Line weathering mix, but I thought, what the heck, let me try this. So I took this shale color that I had, and I basically painted it on this raw white sculptamold. And then when it was dry, it was battleship gray. I mean, it was gray. And I wanted to add some tone to it. So I took another Hunter Line light gray, and I painted it on in places so that it wasn't just a consistent gray. That's going to be my base. I will return to that scene and scenic it with Woodland Scenics ground covers and additional highlights with acrylic paint and whatnot. But for now, those are my base colors, and I'm just moving on. There's where that new tipple will go. That's just the mock-up. Depending on the spirit moves me, I may work on that for next time. We'll see. So I moved a little further into Turtle Creek, a little eastbound. And there's the Turtle Creek Depot, a scratch-built depot, and there's my scratch-built water tank. This is unweathered too, by the way. I'll have to go back and weather this. But I'm going to install these this evening. I'll show you how I did that. First thing is I wanted a concrete foundation, basically. So I took some wood and I just made them all the same length. And then I hand sanded, knocked the corners down so they weren't perfectly parallel and perpendicular. I wanted them a little round. Then with Elmer's glue, I put them down on my foam and I moved them around to they were exactly where I wanted them, with the water tower sitting on there. Yeah, I wanted them dead center to each other. When I was satisfied that everything was in place, I let it dry overnight. And I painted them with a concrete paint, and then with just pure Elmer's glue, I painted Elmer's glue all the way around them. And then I put in ballast cinders. And I find I have to do this a couple times because you always miss something. And then the installation of the Turtle Creek Depot. All my scratch builds, virtually all of them, are built on a plywood base. The advantage of that is that I can, if I ever do move like I did 2 years ago, structures come out instantly. You know, my last layout was 15 years, 16 years in the making, and one afternoon to take all these structures out. So the first thing I do is I mark the perimeter with magic marker. That establishes the perimeter. Then with a razor saw, I cut approximately 1/4 inch parallel and perpendicular, X and Y, if you will, to a depth of that plywood. And then with the putty knife, I simply just pop them out, pop these little squares out. They turn into little bricks, if you will. It's a very fast process. Makes a nice mess. That's a wonderful mess. So I cleared that all out. This is what you're left. Still isn't adequate to put that plywood in place. So with a surf foam planer, it's just a rasp, basically. I just work it back and forth. I got things smooth. After a couple, I place the depot in and out, take out the high spots till I got a nice flush fit. So there's the overall look where it's going in the layout. This is the main line. This is the mining spur for the tipple. This will be a collapsed tunnel in a hobo camp. There is the depot fitting flush, more or less, to the foam. And then this water tank's just there for the effect. And then there is the depot in place. This water tank's still just sitting there. I have to finish over in here, but that's generally the ground cover. I use a combination. I always start off with fine black cinders, then medium black cinders, then several shades of grass, and then some other additional ground covers. The mistake a lot of people make is they'll just use one color or two colors. In nature, you know, we have all these different colors, and that adds to the realism. And there's a couple buildings here in the back. You know, I've been toying with which buildings and where they're going to go. We'll see how this develops, but these are two good candidates for the background there. Then my tipple will be here, and you know, I envision having a wooden fence here and rails, and this, you know, it'll be super detailed like everything I do. These are all the base colors, the base ground cover. This is not fully weathered. You know, it's a process. And that's the joy of the hobby. So that's what I have for you this evening. Are there any questions or any comments?
Yeah, Tom.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jim.
No, go ahead.
I have one question. What type of rail were you using?
Rail, this is Pico.
And I noticed all the ties had chips and chunks out of them, like they were real old ties.
Because it's On30 Pico.
So that's the way they make them, eh?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
Thanks.
right.
Thank you.
Which is pretty difficult to find these days, I guess. But, and then I don't know what's going on with the pricing, but it's pretty expensive too. But
Yeah.
anyway, it is what it is.
Great looking modeling, Tom. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me again. See you
Yes,
next
sir.
week.